Thank you, everybody. Just got a couple of introductory slides. I can promise you no death by PowerPoint today. I think we'll get enough of that during the working day. It's the last thing you need at 5 o'clock from us as well. All I put on this slide, I'm not going to read it out, is the kind of the preamble from the event itself. I just wanted to put that up. If nothing else, we'll make sure we're in the right room. I'm Ian Pickard, member of the Enabling Change Interest Network, part of the APM's volunteering structure, joined by Mark Vincent and Andrew Dalgleish. You'll see a little summary of Mark and Andrew's history experience on the next slide or two. I'm going to facilitate the session. I'll chip in if and where appropriate. But the plan is to have Mark and Andrew speak from their experience on recent projects and programs of successful change. What went well, perhaps a little bit of what didn't go quite so well, which should take us to the sort of 20-25 minute point, at which point we'd like to open the floor to a discussion of questions and answers. You'll have a function within GoToWebinar to submit questions, and I'll feed those to Andrew and Mark, or any points you've got, any areas you'd like us to explore related to the topic for the webinar. So we look forward to hearing from you with your questions and fielding those as the webinar progresses. So again, I'm not going to read it out, but a colleague from the Enabling Change Interest Network, the APM, Mark, as you'll see there, a lot of experience in change, both as somebody on the receiving end of it, but also as a practitioner and consultant in the change industry. Very pleased to have Mark on board. And Andrew Dalgleish from Hitachi Rail, with a lot of experience of being involved with and leading change programs, particularly around business transformation. Andrew brings some complementary knowledge and experience to Mark's to the panel today. And without much more ado, if we can flick onto the next slide, Maya, I think we're into what our two panel members have to share with us, and Mark is kicking off. So all yours, Mark.
I think I have to go first.
Yeah.
Welcome, everyone. I just wanted to check because I've noticed one person said they haven't got any sound. Is the sound okay for everyone? Can you hear? Be ashamed to spend half an hour chatting and then, yeah, so plenty of thumbs up. That's good. Okay, cool. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of programs that I got involved with, or a couple of projects that were part of a bigger program that I was leading for a number of years. It was a few years back, so your definition of recent may be a little bit hazy based on the title. But I think they're important because they're one of those very rare occurrences that we don't get very often, where we had the same project being done in different teams around the world. And so in essence, we were doing the same thing. And so it really gives us a great sort of test bed, if you like, one of those rare examples that we don't often get, where two projects that went very differently, but it was the same underlying technology and the same underlying business process that was being changed. And so I think it gives us a really good example of where we can start to look, I suppose, for some answers in these situations. So the first one, I'm going to take you back to 2017, February 2017, and I'm in New York, in Manhattan, lucky me. It's actually a really nice day, and I'm in a large media company's offices. So it's a big kind of high-rise building, quite fancy building, and sort of classic glass offices. And I'm waiting for one of those meetings that probably we all dread, and that's the meeting with the CFO, in this case, Nancy. And it was we've been running this program now for probably 4 years, and the US component was the second to last that we had to do. And the project, in essence, was to consolidate order to cash and to some extent distribution for, up to that point, we'd done about 8 different European countries. And it had been really, really successful. So considering all the different cultures and different ways of working, essentially what we were doing is bringing everything together into one consolidated way of working. And like I said, we'd gone really well. So why was I kind of worried about this meeting? Why was I concerned about this meeting? Well, the meetings that we'd had with the teams up to that point had become increasingly fractious. The sort of classic, very glum faces. I'm sure you've all seen those, around the table. Lots of side comments and rolling eyes and that kind of stuff. And ultimately, really a lack of engagement, a lack of kind of effort, and not a lack of energy. Let's say a lack of effort, lack of energy. And yeah, just more and more more and more problems rather than solutions popping up. And so I could sort of feel this building, and I had a sense that things weren't right. But we carried on. We were sort of pushing forward. Anyway, the meeting I was just about to join, I was sitting in this glass office, looking around. Could hear all the sort of the hubbub of the office, and then in she walks, Nancy, sits down across the table. There's a few of us in the room. And yeah, her words just cut straight through. There was no messing about. We're pulling the plug. And pulling the plug in that sense meant that we were, in essence, essentially like a jigsaw puzzle with a piece missing. And that piece missing was a significant country, a significant territory. And essentially what they were doing was going their own way. The global model that we were working towards was no longer going to be quite so global. So I'm going to contrast that with another project that we did about a year after that in the UK, and we were sort of planning the project. It was about September. I'm going to say September 2019. That feels about right. And we're all around the table planning this project, and frankly, we're all staring at each other, going, we have no idea how we're going to achieve this. We had all the we were doing the post-it mapping on the wall, working back from a delivery date that we knew we really had to hit, which was the end of January. It's now September. And unlike the US, we'd only done their order to cash and a little bit of distribution consolidation. What we were doing here was order to cash. We were effectively reinventing the whole pricing model for this particular country. We were putting in a new customer service function, people, process, systems, and we were putting in a new credit management function, people, process, systems. It was a standing start. We were here in September, and we had to get the whole lot done by the end of January. So fast forward, that project went live at the end of January, and it went live with very few issues. We effectively reinvented the pricing, the customer service was running well, the credit management was running well. And it gave me a real wake-up call, because it made me realize in that moment there were some fundamental differences. And those differences they weren't the technology. They couldn't be, because we were using the same technology. They weren't even really the business process, because in actual fact, we were using very similar business processes. The business model was very similar. Okay, you could argue the market was different, but actually, when you distill down to the essence of what the market was trying to achieve and what people were trying to achieve, it was very similar. So I'm going to ask you to sort of, by all means, put something in the chat. What do you think the differences were? What do you think was the fundamental difference between a project from a standing start that was able to achieve great things within a number of months, and another project that had actually run up to that point for a year, and then we ended up pulling the plug? So I'll give you a clue. I think I can see some things coming in. Yeah. So planning is a classic one, right? So communication, yeah, to a point. There was something going on in the UK project that just felt different. There was an energy, there was a drive, there was a determination. We had some very late nights. We had some very stressful moments, as you can imagine, in that very short timeline. We may have consumed quite a few pizzas. There might have been the odd pub night, yeah? It all happened. But the thing that I noticed more than anything else was the fun, the energy, the positivity, the drive, the determination to actually get this thing done. And that wasn't only within a few people that happened to be in the project team, that was right across the business. And most importantly, from the senior stakeholder in that situation, the person who was able to, in essence, sign off on all of the things that needed to be signed off, to actually agree to the things that needed to agree to. See, in the US, actually that senior stakeholder, who wasn't the person that I was facing off with, it was actually her boss. And in that particular situation, he was absent. He wasn't even involved. He distanced himself from the whole thing. So what actually was happening here was there was a desire, a drive to move forward that didn't exist in the US. And there was something else going on in the US as well, which I was only partly aware of at the time. And that was a cultural difference. So on the one hand, there was not the same level of drive and desire and buy-in for the reason for change that there was in the UK. But also there was a lot of friction. So what do I mean by friction? What I'm talking about is there were a lot of reasons why people would want to stay as they are or not want to take any risks, maybe to put it a better way. And one of those big reasons was that in the US, if you make a mistake or if things don't go well or if something starts to unravel in some way, people were looking to distance themselves from the problem because it's quite a hire and fire culture. You can literally be gone within a few days. And that was really at the essence of it. On the one hand, the drive and desire for the endpoint wasn't there in the same way as it was in the UK. And on the other hand, there were a lot of reasons why people wouldn't want to get on board or potentially wouldn't want to put themselves at any sort of risk. And as we know, change involves some element of risk. It's just a natural part of things, right? If you're going to change anything, especially transformation, it involves risk. I mean, the UK were actually prepared to completely reinvent their pricing model. And I can tell you now, in that particular industry, that is no mean feat. There was a lot of customer engagement that needed to happen, a lot of testing that needed to happen. But they did it. They got on board with it and they did it willingly. They were prepared to compromise. Whereas in the US, that compromise willingness wasn't there. People were actually wanting to cling on. And one of the reasons the plug got pulled was they didn't want to change their underlying financial integration, despite the fact that it was actually quite antiquated and despite the fact that it was working against them. It was what they were comfortable with, and therefore they wanted to stick with it. So it was that mindset, that attitude, that sort of willingness, if you like, to explore, experiment, take a few risks, but measured risks. But ultimately, those risks were taken right at the top of the organization. The guy who was running the UK organization at the time, Peter, he was very prepared. He knew what needed to be done. And he was very prepared to stand by and be pragmatic about these decisions. And most importantly, take the decisions as well. And give people that sense of support, that feeling that everybody was in it together. And ultimately, when I really distill it down, that's really the difference. That's what it felt like. In the US, it felt like very much an us and them. And in the UK, it was very much we were all in it together. And actually, for many years later, I was still in contact with some of the people, and we all sort of look back fondly at that moment, despite the pressures, despite the crazy timelines, despite the worries we all had, because none of us wanted to drop the ball, of course. But we pulled together. And as a consequence, it actually brought people together. And we ended up forging something that, as I said, we'll all remember for the future. So I thought I'd share that with you because it just gave me, in essence, a real insight in that moment. It was something that I'll never forget. and something that informs my support that I now give for my clients. Because one of the things I've learned is that when you get this stuff right, when you get that energy right, when people want the change fundamentally, then you've got something to work with. Everything else is essentially trying to push people along. And yeah, we all know from the stats how that goes. So that's in essence where my part. So I think I'm going to pause it there. So I don't want to take up too much time here. How are we doing for time?
That's good. Thank you, Mark. And yeah, really fascinating insights into the different cultures and how that can impact successful change. So yeah, and a few questions coming in. So please keep them coming. And after Andrew's had his time on the microphone, we'll switch to the questions and start asking those. So over to you, Andrew. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Mark. I'll try and build on that a little bit. So yeah, I'm Andrew. I'm a project director, as Ian's already said, with Hitachi Rail, and I guess I come from change a little bit accidentally. I've like maybe many on the call, it sounds like I've been a project manager, an engineering manager, and a project director now, and have kind of slightly accidentally ended up leading change programs. So I'm sort of fascinated from my sort of accidental angle at, well, what makes change really work, and when does it not? So Mark's examples are really intriguing to me, and I've in the last sort of 5 years been involved in sort of leading 3 different change programs, and actually I think they complement Mark's a little bit in that they're 3 completely different ones. So we've had 2 kind of change examples that are in the same space, compare and contrast what's different. I've been interested to think about the 3 areas that I've been leading in the last 5 years. They're different, and I think from that I've teased out some interesting lessons that I'm certainly keen to take forward, and I'll just share a little bit on that today. Just as a bit of a sort of a summary, I won't talk about it too much, but the 3 areas that I've led on. So the first assignment I had about 5 years ago was around an engineering function within our business, a lot of engineers, and at the time that team was struggling a bit around its leadership space, not enough engineers to meet our business needs. And so I was asked to come and establish a new management team and rebuild that sort of engineering capability. So that was all about engineering function and getting it in the right space. My second sort of space that I got involved in leading was around our construction teams. Hitachi Rail, as you might expect, we make trains, and we do a lot of work with signalling on Network Rail, on London Underground, in those sorts of spaces. So we have a lot of people out every night doing construction type activities, testing, installation, that sort of thing. And this assignment was really around right-sizing that organisation, getting the right resources in the right place at the right levels. But also, I was asked to get much better delivery control. So a completely different sort of change challenge around a lot of resources, people, not even in the same time zone as I was operating. So we'll chat about that in a minute. And then the third sort of experience, which I'm currently engaged with, is really around a business change. One part of our business has had a really successful 20 years of delivering mega projects. But actually going forward, that area of the business is going to become more of a portfolio. So the change challenge there is really about, well, how do we adapt a big organization to now think differently in a portfolio way, and to do that competitively with really good processes. So those are my 3 sort of examples, and as you can see, unlike Mark's, they're sort of really diverse. So maybe we can't compare apples with apples, but I think we can kind of tease out some lessons there. And I could probably talk all day about the different things I've probably learned and am learning, but there's two that I really wanted to bring to this discussion, and hopefully that leads to a wider discussion afterwards. Um, and I guess the first thing that I've been reflecting on is the importance of just getting the right group of people together when you start a change exercise. And maybe that links in a little bit with Mark's sort of comments around a positive culture, a group of people who really want to enjoy delivering the change, want to go for it. I guess we often say, don't we, as project professionals, we're only as good as the teams that we have. You know, we can be charismatic leaders, we could have really good leadership skills, we could know all of the APM body of knowledge or something like that. But actually, it's our teams, isn't it, that make us often and help us deliver. And I think that's even more the case, my reflection, in the area of change management. Often there is too much to do, isn't there, when we want to change an organization or a space. There's too much to communicate. There's lots of activities to do. And actually, so having a team around you that can help you with that and getting that set up correctly as we start a change process, my reflection is that's really important. So in my sort of engineering function assignment, one of the things that really helped me, and I didn't make this happen, this was accidental, is that I found some what I call magic people. They were just some people I stumbled across in that organization who wanted to change and wanted to help me change, and in fact actually were super keen and challenged me to do more and to and so actually I've been reflecting a little bit that whenever I get involved in change, I should look out for people and people and allies who want to be part of the change. And I guess it's not just people we've tapped up and asked to volunteer. It's people who are really keen and want to go for it. So that's sort of one reflection. In my sort of portfolio business change assignment at the moment, we've got quite a lot of senior managers who they're on the same page, they want to be part of it, but they're pretty busy. It's quite hard to get them fully and completely engaged in all of the change process. But we do have, we've recently started a training program for some of our graduates, some of our early managers, and actually I've been able to get some of them involved in the change process, and they're super keen. So they don't have quite so much to do, they want to get more exposure, and actually they've become part of the change team. So it's just reflected, I guess, that maybe in the past we'd have had quite hierarchical structures, we'd have had quite fixed management teams, but I think there is an opportunity now in some of our organizations which are more matrix, maybe they're more about a network. Actually, there's an opportunity to bring in a diverse group. It isn't just the senior team who get involved, it can be those junior graduates that we're training up, or it can be a different group of people who might want to help. So I guess that's a sort of a reflection. I guess the last piece on the sort of people piece is that my construction team example, I struggled a lot more actually to build the team there, and maybe that's not surprising. A lot of them are on nights, a lot of them are really serious technical people who know their stuff, they're experts, but they're probably not as much part of the business journey as many of us might be. And actually that change program, it did get over the line eventually, but it took a lot longer. And my reflection is not having that team in place has made it a lot more difficult. And it might be something we chat about later on as to how you get expert teams, maybe teams that are in a different kind of space, to really be part of the change journey. So that's one reflection, getting the right people in place really helping you with your change journey. The other area I wanted to just reflect on a little bit was about getting the right sort of model starting from the beginning. I'm an engineer, or I trained as an engineer, and we would never dream in Hitachi Rail of starting any engineering activity without really careful design, getting it all checked. It's railway, so it's safety related. So we're very careful with all of that. But it is my reflection a little bit that in some of these change activities that I've been involved in or observed, that sometimes we just plow straight in. We have some fixed model of how we do change. We have some sort of campaign that we dive straight into it. And actually, it might be better to think more carefully about what is the right model to use for any particular change activity. As you can see, my three examples are all very different, and yet actually I think, reflecting back, I've probably taken the same sort of approaches starting each one of them, and that, on reflection, just being honest on this call, is probably not the right way. And going forward, I want to, in future, probably think a bit more carefully, take a little bit more time before I get a particular model or take a particular approach with any particular change activity. On a sort of engineering example there at the top, we actually started quite small. We weren't very confident at the beginning. Things were in a pretty bad way. And actually, that meant we had some early successes. We started small, we managed to get a few things done, and then confidence built. And then actually, we were then able to get more change things done. Now, that wasn't a very intentional strategy, but on reflection, we kind of stumbled across something that was actually perfect for that approach. With my portfolio business change that I'm involved in at the moment, we've started quite big. It's a big, bold program, a lot of people involved, and it's got a lot of energy behind it. But actually, my reflection a little bit is we haven't quite yet made the real steps, had the early successes that we should be getting. And so there's something a little bit about, well, have we started too big, or have we made it too large at the beginning? And actually, we need probably too much energy to keep things going. So they're just thoughts for reflection. But I guess I've been reflecting a little bit. Not every program is the same, and sometimes I think in our businesses we get pushed into a little bit of doing a big change program when actually that's not quite the approach. Maybe something smaller, something even a little bit under the radar might be a better approach. So hopefully that's helpful. We can talk more about those things, but those are my sort of two reflections. Could say a lot more, but hopefully that helps a bit to get us going with the conversation.
A few questions popping into the chat that I could probably pick off against what I was talking about.
Yeah.
So when I laid out those two scenarios, you'll see that I didn't actually give specific answers as to what the solution would look like. But I'm going to ask you this, and in essence, it's been such a passion for me. I've essentially built the whole company around this idea, and that is this: if all of the people that you need to get on board with your project, program, transformation, doesn't matter really what scale it is, if they wanted it enough, do you think you could achieve your end goal? And I'll ask you to reflect that on yourself. If they really, really wanted it enough, do you think that we could maybe achieve pretty much anything? So I'm going to leave that with you whilst we move on and take a few questions.
Cool. Thank you, Mark. First question. It was actually the first question to come in, but I think it's a particularly interesting one. It was aimed at you, Mark, while you were talking us through your experience, your example. But obviously, please feel free to chip in, Andrew. And it's from Dan, and it's from the experience you gained with the successful project versus the unsuccessful project. How did this change how you transferred the valuable experience and knowledge into future change projects.
Yeah. Well, in essence, what I've done, as a consequence of those transformations, and obviously the stuff I'd learned before, sometimes when the students are ready, the teacher appears, and that lesson in the US was very much my teacher. And then I realized, when you look back, what was it that made those successes I'd had before and the ones that were more challenging? What were the differences? And really what it comes down to is human behavioral characteristics. And it's the extent to which we understand why humans behave the way we do, because frankly, we're not logical, or at least we're not always logical. In fact, I'm going to put it out there, we're rarely logical. And yet what often happens in projects and programs is we tend to use logical tools to deal with what is effectively an illogical problem. And so that's essentially what I've been working on, my company's been working on, is frameworks and tools and everything else that help project managers, project leaders to understand that illogical human behavioral side. So to pick up on Daniel's point, that is in essence the way I now help clients, is to help them understand how it is, how are people feeling about this change project program, and how can you then on the one hand, for example, drive up the levels of motivation, because one of the big things that often is left on the table when it comes to big projects is people frankly don't want it enough. We leave them with a sense of ambivalence. We get into workshops, we get into practicalities, we present PowerPoint slides of the vision that frankly leave people feeling, ambivalent. And it's okay, to say that people are not against the change. We tend to sort of focus on things like resistance, but there's a whole world of difference between being okay with it and driving forward, desperate to make it happen, right? You know that energy, all of you, because you felt it yourself, those things that you're desperately motivated to do. And there are ways that you can achieve that in a group of people. We've got plenty of examples throughout history where that's been achieved. And so, I would urge you to take that time, think about what's motivating people. But on the other hand, as I found out in the US, think about what's the friction that's stopping them. What would cause them to pause or reflect or pull back from the change? So, as I said at an event early before Christmas, 2 questions to ask yourself. Firstly, put yourself in their shoes. Imagine for a minute you were them, as in the people you want to get on board. 2 questions. The first one is, why would they get on board? If you were them, why would you get on board? Why would you put energy in? Why would you take the risks? Why would you put the extra hours in? And the next question is, why wouldn't you? What would stop you getting on board? What would make you pause? What would make you fearful, concerned? Yeah. Just 2 questions. Ask yourself those 2 questions and see where it takes you. I pretty much guarantee it will take you to a much more useful place than we often end up. And trust me, I've been there too.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Mark. I was going to say, have you got anything to add, Andrew?
Well, I don't know, it's probably cheeky, Ian, but I was going to ask Mark a question. I'm probably not allowed to, am I? But I guess one of...
Oh, no, we'll allow it.
I love the point, and I really think that's right. I suppose I wonder sometimes, Mark, how do we get that passion? Some of our change objectives are a bit dry, or at least they seem a bit dry. And we're often in corporate worlds, which we don't. It's hard to actually, take my 250 construction workers. It's difficult to get them passionate. So do you have any help with that?
Yeah, well, I do. Obviously, it could be a whole topic on that on a separate call. But in essence, humans have we all have very similar characters. For example, we're wired for stories, okay? Stories and analogies can be really, really powerful, okay? And they are massively underused, especially in the corporate world. And dare I say it, especially amongst engineers. And many of the project managers, leaders on this call will be engineers. Now, I happen to spend a lot of time with engineers. Some of my big clients are engineering clients. And they've even said to me, it's kind of like the one senior guy said to me, Martin, he said, I feel like my brain's wired differently, right? So, my job is to help him and help them to be able to sell this change in a way that's going to go deep, not just sit in the rational part of the brain. We've got to hit the amygdala. We've got to hit that emotional center of the brain. There are plenty of techniques out there. I mean, I'm happy to have conversations with people offline and talk about some of those. But yeah, stories, really, really powerful. Analogies, really, really powerful. The other thing is really set the scene as well, because quite often in organizations, especially, in a competitive environment, often the people working within the organization that you want to get on board just simply can't see the wider world that you can see. They can't see the storm coming, right? So paint the picture, really use every ounce. We have 5 senses. What can you see? What are you going to see, hear, feel in 6 months, 12 months time? What's it going to look like? Let them place themselves in that space and to really understand what it is that it's going to be like to be them in 6, 12 months. The last one in all of that is remember it's always about them, not the organization and not you. Right? I mean, all the time, it's what the organization is going to do, why the organization is going to do it. Be honest, nobody cares. Okay? Nobody cares. So make it about the individual that's in front of you, or the individuals that are in front of you. Yeah? Always about them. And then you're going to start to get their attention. So there is plenty, a really fast way of saying there are plenty of tools you can use. Very well proven. They work. But they are often underused. And I think for this population of people we have on the call here, that represents a massive opportunity for you guys. Right? Change the game.
Great, thank you. One sort of closely related to that for you, Andrew, which has come from Anchor, which is aimed at Andrew. What sources of organisational energy did you identify as being crucial in your portfolio example? Because obviously that's a little bit different to the other examples of change that we've heard.
Actually, as a change program, there's quite a lot of there's been quite a lot of good enthusiasm for it. I'm not sure we've quite got to where Mark is sort of encouraging us to get to, but as a sort of portfolio, it's been a really successful part of the business for I probably said a sort of a couple of decades, and so probably that's the kind of, I don't know if this quite answers your question, but that's probably one of the key sort of bits of story or bits of energy that we're sort of playing on at the moment is we've been successful and we want to be successful in the future. Maybe that links a bit back to Mark's point about it's about the person. We could say, well, let's change, let's get a new organization because that will be better for our profit or better for our sort of sales or that sort of thing. But actually our focus, our story has been a bit about, well, you engineers, you business, the business people involved in the business have been tremendously successful over this time, and we want to carry that on, and we want you to be part of that, and we want you to feel like you're part of that. So I don't know if that helps, but that's what we've been focused on a little bit.
You got a thumbs up, so it looks like Anchor could relate to your response. Thank you, Andrew. Question from Graham, which I think is one of our favourite topics, which is how do you manage change fatigue when the portfolio tries to deliver change on top of change on top of change coming from multiple directions, and people just start to switch off?
It's incredible how frequent this happens, isn't it, in organizations?
Indeed.
And it's I talked a little bit about friction, didn't I? On the one hand, we've got this kind of energy to move forward, and on the other hand, reasons why we wouldn't. The question too, and a key reason for people often is that they are, just crazy trying to do lots of different things. And one of the big things with change fatigue is often it's a consequence of people not being able to see the bigger picture, the bigger plan, and how all this stuff fits together. And so they end up in this place of confusion. They're trying to work on 6 different things, and we know how this stuff works, right? There's always those few knowledgeable people in the organization who get burdened with everything, and they end up becoming the bottleneck and slowing things down. And quite often organizations or leaders fall into this trap of thinking that if we push more change through the organization, we'll get more done. And in fact, we know from various different experiments over the years, and from manufacturing onwards, actually the opposite's true. Sometimes you've got to slow down to go fast. Whether it's lean thinking, theory of constraints, all that kind of stuff, right? It's a fact. And so, it's a classic prioritization issue is really what this boils itself down to. And it might be the leaders and it might be the people involved. Maybe they're working on things that they don't need to. But the messaging hasn't been clear enough as to what's important ultimately. That's what in my experience, that's what it often boils down to. We are actually battling another problem at the moment, which is since COVID, the level of engagement at work in general is low, right? It's much lower. It's literally dropped off a cliff. Combination of factors, obviously, people feeling a bit more isolated with remote working is potentially part of it, but there's lots of different reasons. But we have to work harder to get people's engagement. So the things that potentially we got away with before COVID, we no longer can, right? So you've got to work harder, especially in a project program transformation. You try and transform stuff when people are already disengaged. Tell you now you're going to have a problem, right? So it's our job to really ramp up that level of motivation. And in fact, in a disengaged environment, we could be the thing that actually gets people excited again, right? If we play it right, we could be that sort of beacon of hope for people, right? So that's what I've seen. It's often A, there's disengagement in general. B, people are just overwhelmed because there's too much going on in the organisation. And of course, fear is often playing a part as well.
I was going to add, and this is probably not a fully formed thought, but I wonder if we need to be more creative in our approaches. Certainly in my business and in businesses I'm associated with, often it's a one size, a big change program, lots of trumpets and banners. And you can see the eyes rolling and you can see the fatigue and oh no, again, we've got another one of these that's not going to go anywhere. And I wonder if there's some thinking to be done about creative and different approaches that may be more low key for some people, or just iterative, where we start on some small things and build up. Sometimes I think we get stuck on one model, and I wonder whether in our hybrid post-COVID world we have to be more creative than that.
I think that's a really good point. If you do what you've always done, you get what you've always got, and as the saying goes. And it may have worked in a slower pace of change world that we used to be in, but it's been changing. Obviously, it's been accelerating for some time. But post COVID and with AI and everything else coming along that we know about, the pace at which organisations are changing at is rapidly increasing, and not all for the good, right? Some of those projects and programs, you could question their merit. Do we actually, I think I was talking to some guys the other day in the project transformation space, and the exec order was, we need you to get on and do what you can with AI. Never mind what the organization's purpose is and we need you to go and do something with AI, right? We need that, and that was their instruction, and that's a complete waste of resources. And of course, in my humble opinion, the cart, the cart before the horse, or tail wagging the dog, or whatever analogy you want to use.
Yeah, I'll just chip in with a couple of thoughts at that point, if I may. And I think you hear an awful lot about change fatigue, but what I don't feel I see all that often is people taking a step back. The leaders of change and the teams that are delivering the change taking a step back and going, okay, we're experiencing change fatigue. Why? Why is that? And I think it talks back to your two questions, Mark. And actually, quite often, my perspective on it is it's not people necessarily feeling fatigue from the change or from change on change on change. It's actually that the leaders of the change haven't taken that time to put it in the context that the individuals can relate to. So they've not answered the so what or the what's in it for me. So you're actually seeing change fatigue because people are disengaged in the outcome or the benefits of the change, rather than necessarily that they're just fed up with change. And I also think sort of found myself in the depths of this. Rather than going for the big sort of monolithic, all singing, all dancing, banners, flashing lights, big change program, breaking it down into more bite-sized chunks makes a huge amount of sense. But again, something I'm conscious of is that the people leading that change and the team that's delivering the change, they'll see those bite-sized chunks as part of a bigger picture, which are where the different bits of change interact and all come together to deliver some bigger outcome, and there's some synergy between the parts. But because they're familiar with it and close to it, they haven't necessarily communicated that bigger picture and how everything links together to the people who are either impacted by the change or responsible ultimately for delivering it. So it's back down to the human nature, the communication, and that sort of side of it, and also taking that step back and going, okay, how do I pitch this in a way that the individuals can relate to? So
that's so true. So true.
My thoughts for
and actually, the point in all of this, I appreciate that, some of the stuff that I was talking about earlier might feel like it's, a mile away from where you're at. And actually, it doesn't have to be, right? Because any step you make in that direction will get you a great result. Painting the picture that you've just said there, Ian, is such a great thing that quite often people don't do it because they kind of assume everyone knows. Can almost guarantee they don't, right? So really spell it out, really be clear. And the more concise you are with the language as well, really clear, concise language. Don't overcomplicate things. You don't need 20 PowerPoint slides. Ideally, one is great. Yeah. And if you can have pictures on it, even better, right? Make it really, really, really obvious, all right? To the point where you think it's so obvious, it's crazy, all right? The number of times I even put a video out and I think to myself, I'm not going to say that, it's too obvious. Guarantee somebody will come straight back and go, I hadn't thought of it like that. Yeah. It's just, because we're busy. We're all busy, right? You've got to cut through that stuff and really get to people. So clarity, really important. Hit the emotional buttons, stories, analogies, paint the big picture, use all the senses. We're humans, right? We see, we hear, we feel, we smell, right? Whatever you can do to place people in a world, get their attention, and then fundamentally make it about them. These are things that, if you look back through history, the stuff that's happened, the big changes that have happened, whether it's Gandhi, the civil rights movement, even COVID to some extent, right? Look at the behavioral factors that went on there. I mean, one of the things I can tell you is that all the governments around the world since 2010 have had behavioral units. Every marketing company understands human behavior. They are rinsing us all the time. Mobile phones, right? These things have got us addicted because they understand what drives human behavior. Okay. We can use this stuff more in projects and therefore get much better outcomes and make it better for the people, right? Because ultimately we want them happy. We want them engaged. We want them championing the change for us. Because trust me, as a project manager, I've done both and I can tell you which one's a lot easier. Because on one of them, you're literally going to ride on the top of the wave, come out the other side and be celebrated for the fantastic work you did, feeling such a fraud because in fact everyone else did the work. There's your choice.
I've got a slight pivot now. A really interesting question from Patrick, which is data key to encouraging people to make change? For example, better analysis of benefits at the start or use of predictive modelling to the outcomes. So what are your thoughts on the part that data has to play in successful change?
I'm going to use an analogy here and I hope it works. Yes, of course, data is useful. But in my humble opinion, it doesn't drive change. If it did, I mean, you think about today where we're at, we've got two major problems, right? We have a global health crisis. This is the first generation where we believe our kids potentially will die younger than the generation before them, number one. Now, that's not a lack of information, is it? Because we've got more information today, more access to the facilities today than we've ever had. All right, so it's not information; it can't be. The other problem, of course, is global climate change. Now, we have plenty of information. We have the World Wide Web, we have YouTube videos everywhere, we have podcasts and everything, right? So we have more information. We're better informed today, or we could argue that we're information rich and wisdom poor potentially. But we have information. Rarely does it. We've got to hit those emotional buttons, and so data is useful. I'm not saying it's not useful, but it's certainly not the answer, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, is it almost kind of maybe in our change management worlds we get a bit muddled between the tools and the good practices and the things that we should use, and we should be using data and doing it really well and not having too much of it and getting just the right amount to drive the right conversations. But almost seeing it as that tool and not the sort of primary motivation that's going to get us all out of bed and passionate about whatever we need to do.
Yeah, and that's true of all tools, isn't it? From Prince2 to Agile to Kotter to ProSci, we can end up putting the tool before the objective and, forgetting why we're doing it.
Yeah, indeed.
And trust me, change management suffers that one big time, I can tell you now.
Indeed. All about the people. Question from Daniel, aimed at you, Andrew. About the importance of early team development to establish and enact a change. Have you experience of constraints to the change being set by others? For example, a client constraining the change, which sets boundaries before you've managed to put together a sort of talented, enthusiastic delivery team, and how you address that.
Yeah. I mean, I that's quite a big question.
Yes, indeed.
It probably needs me to sit in a room for a while to think about it. I suppose in my examples, I haven't particularly had a client constrain, but I certainly think that in my kind of construction example, there's a team there that just by the way it's set up, the culture that the team had of being very focused on its engineering, it's more than just individuals. There was a sort of a culture around that team, and that resulted almost in this team is off limits for these sorts of change activities. I'm not sure if that quite answers your question, but I certainly felt that there's a whole group of people there. It's not just about individual resistors who might not want my change to happen. It's actually a whole group that's a bit off bounds because they're on nights, but also because they're part of a group and a culture that doesn't really do corporate business things. We're just technical experts, leave us alone. So I don't know if that's kind of one experience I've had, and I think how to overcome that. I wasn't particularly successful in overcoming it very well, but one of my reflections looking back would be that there is something about getting alongside people in that particular case where you're alongside technical experts and really seeing them as the expert. Sometimes in these sorts of scenarios it can become a bit them and us. We're the sort of change agents, we're the business, we need to change you, rather than actually seeing that group as the people who are going to come up with the answers and change and lead the change almost. So our role is to enable them to do that. Mm-hmm. So we're out of time, I think, Ian. So we could probably talk about that for longer, but I think there's something there about how do you not do change to people, but coach them and enable them to do change for you.
Very well put.
So,
very well put.
Done with them rather than done to them, and then
correct.
You've won half the engagement battle, haven't you? Fantastic. Thank you both. It's been a fascinating sort of canter around recent experiences of successful change and less so. We've got a ton of questions we haven't managed to answer, I'm afraid, as is always the case with these sort of sessions. One thing just to pick up to close, Melissa asked, can we recommend any resources or books on change management? What I'd say to that, rather than answer that now, Melissa, is on the Enabling Change Interest Network page on the APM website, what we will try to do is add some pointers towards material, not just books, but some other stuff online, which relate to the topic we've discussed today. So over the next week, maybe a couple of weeks, see what we can get there. Mark looks like he's about to.
Yeah, no, I was going to say I have loads of free resources. So I've put my LinkedIn profile here. I'm also happy to pick up on any questions specifically that you didn't get answered today. It's absolutely no problem at all. Just connect with me on LinkedIn. But we've got loads of free stuff, and I can point you. We've got a whole page about change management on the website, which tells you about all the models, where to go. So that's at appliedchange.co.uk. So change management models, there's a page on there. So loads of stuff,
Mark.
more than you'll need, I think.
Yep, that's great. It just leaves me to thank everybody for attending. Thank you both for your time, your thoughts, and your insight. And watch this space. We're delighted for you to join us at any future webinars that we arrange. Thank you very much, and all have a good evening.
Thank you all.
Thank you.